Hey, we're back. It's another work day, so that means it must be lunchtime. And it also means Red Ranger came calling. So I will read the last little bit from yesterday because we got to keep on track with this and find out what's going on. So here's the last thing we said yesterday. I almost turned back right there. I was growing uneasy about the whole matter, and a public guarantee of grumpiness didn't help. I knocked on the huge door unzestfully. And see, remember, he was marching right up there. Look at his little self. He's marching right up to the door. All right, what happens? The big door swung open slowly on rusty hinges. The little pointy-eared old man from before stood there holding a tea tray, scowling. The light from an enormous fire behind him made the room flicker with grotesque shadows. My thoughts turned to retreat, but instead I stood at attention. "The Red Ranger has come calling," I said, and bowed deeply over shaking knees. The little man scowled further, but motioned for us to enter. The terrible shadows were caused by monstrous toys looming in dark corners. And dozing in a fantastic chair was what I figured to be old Sonder Claus, the most ancient man I had ever seen. He coughed quietly and breathed with a rattling wheeze of great antiquity, which means he was old. His body, shrunken and folded, looked as though it had retreated from life itself. Before I could announce myself again, he spoke without looking up. "Turn around," he said in a voice the age of the mountains. "Go home. Go back to bed. What you're looking for isn't here. I'm 435 years old, which makes me very tired." Even in my mounting terror, I was grateful to meet another skilled liar. "I'm Buck Tweed, the Red Ranger of Mars, 602 years old. I said, adding as a bonus, "and I do not believe at all in Santa Claus." With that, the little elf shuddered and looked in horror to his master, whose eyes had ignited. The old man began to push himself up from his huge chair, and he finally looked at me, glowering. Frankly, this was more than I could take. I panicked and shot the old faker with my disintegrator ray gun. You gotta see this picture, you guys. Look at him. Look how cute. He's got his ray gun. He's pointing it at the ancient guy in the fun chair with the reindeer. Look at the reindeer on top. See all the toys in the corners that made those crazy shadows? The old man sank back into his chair, stunned, as if a tuna fish were stuck to his forehead and not a dart. He pulled it off, then motioned with a bony hand for me to approach. I did, deeply regretting my violence. When I got close, he took my pistol and held it up gingerly for a better look. His eyes widened. "Never," he said, "have I made such a thing. What is it for?" His question brought me back to comfortable territory, masking my panic. I said, "Why, I've shot down a fleet of Nazi attack ships with that. I've mowed down a mob of Venusian Hottentots. I've even burned a hole through Mars's moon and singed fannies on Pluto." I had been infected with the room's atmosphere of malarkey. I gave him another chance to hatch one himself. "They say you're Santa Claus," I said. His face darkened. "Santa Claus," he said, repeating the name as though it hurt. His eyes looked ahead and seemed to focus beyond the walls. "He's a foolish story for small children. He's a big, jolly bribe to control their natural criminal instincts." He chuckled at this without smiling. "It's been that way for a long time, but it wasn't always." His eyes focused back on me. Smiling sadly, he said, "He's old now, and the times are newer. People are newer. He studied my ray gun again. Who'd believe now? You see him? Sonder Claus. You see him looking at Red Ranger's gun? And look at Red Ranger down there at the bottom. He's like, wait a minute, what's he doing? It's a buck tweed disintegrator. I'd believe, I said, but I wasn't sure at all. I had to see what the old fruitcake had up his sleeve. I'd believe if he could make a reindeer fly. For the first time, a light brightened in his eyes. The elf looked appalled and whispered, "Don't do it, boss. You're not 300 anymore." The old man wasn't listening as he pushed himself out of the chair and settled his weight on wobbly knees. He shuffled over to the fireplace mantel and held his hands around a little carved reindeer. Scrunching his eyes, he made a great effort to do something, although I couldn't tell what. After several minutes of nothing happening, the old man rested on his elbows, exhausted. "Blast," he said in frustration, just as the elf dropped his tea tray. We turned around and I heard the old man say, "Oops." Amelia, remember Amelia the dog, was drifting slowly up toward the ceiling like a leaky balloon. If a dog can look unamused, she did. And if a space ranger can look dumbfounded and thrilled at the same time, then I did too. Oh my gosh, you guys. Look at Amelia, she's floating. Look at Santa Sonder Claus. He's exhausted. And do you see the elf who dropped the tea? And there I am. There's the Red Ranger, rather. He's staring up at him like, what's going on, man? Even a hard nut such as myself sometimes had to consider overwhelming evidence, odd as it was. My mind was saying that I was fixing to get another rug pulled out from below me, but my eyes were saying that a dog was floating in the rafters. The tug of war inside me, lightheaded and through a fog of confusion, I heard myself say, "I have a wish." The old man's eyes lit up fully this time. The elf looked freshly appalled. "Don't do it, boss. It's been a long time. Let's just get you to bed." The old man waved him off, turned to look at me as if he were starving and I was holding a boysenberry pie. Like an old actor reciting lines from his youth, he said, "So, what would you like for Christmas?" I was already at the edge, so I leapt. An official, buck tweed, 2-speed, Crime Stopper, Star Hopper bicycle, I said. He frowned and looked at me as if I'd asked for a blue cantaloupe. I described my prize again, saying each word slowly and louder. He bent down over the back of the elf and cupped his ear. I made it simple. "I'd like a tweed bicycle." "That's what you want? You're quite sure?" he said, looking surprised. "I'm sure. A tweed bicycle. It's the latest thing." The old man straightened up and scratched his head. "I'll try my best," he said, grinning. I roped Amelia and hauled her down from the overhead beams. She was near emotional collapse during the walk home, but then I was too. That's it today. You got to see this picture, though, before we go. So Sonder Claus is trying to listen to Red Ranger and make sure that he understands. And he understood. A tweed bicycle. And there's Red Ranger. He's basically pleading with him. And the old elf is so worried. And look at Amelia. She's up on the rafters because she won't stop floating. Because instead of a reindeer, he made Amelia float. So tomorrow, we'll check and see what happens next. You guys have a nice night. Once again, it's Shannon, Jean, reading to you from her car.